I am really fortunate that I don't often actually get to do things like MC conferences. Most of the time, I am working on behalf of our urban Indian population. And how we define in my organization, the Urban Indian Health Institute, which is a tribal epidemiology center serving American Indians and Alaska Natives in Seattle, we define urban Indians as Native people who are currently living off of federally defined lands in urban areas. So, if the picture hadn't faded so quickly, you would have seen that urban is small u, Indian, big I. One of the things that has happened in the story that is told about our people, and often, sometimes we begin to believe those stories, is that urban Indian, the urban part, becomes more important than the Indian part, than the tribal part. And what it's done is created tensions very often between our rural and our urban tribal communities about the question that is, who's more Indian? Who is the ones who are holding on to the culture and tradition? And we have created very, very artificial, not real divides between our community. Again, those are not real. I identify as an urban American Indian. I have been living in the city of Seattle since I was 18 years old. But I am a tribal person. I am deeply connected to my tribal communities, to my Pawnee people, to my Athabascan people, to my families, and to my community, and I am deeply rooted in the incredible, resilient, intertribal community currently located in Seattle. So, urban, very small part, Indian, biggest part. We also have to recognize that we are Native people living on Native land regardless of where we are. This is Indian country, and I'm not letting the federal government define that for me. This is Indian country. Any land that I step on is Indian country. So I recognize that I live on the lands of the Coast Salish people in Seattle, and I'm a guest on their lands, and I have a responsibility as a guest. And our incredible intertribal community in the city of Seattle does that. And I know that the same thing exists across the nation. So some of the statistics that my organization has, and you can get these off of our website, uihi.org, is that if we look at the US Census, approximately 78% of all American Indians and Alaska Natives currently do not live on reservation or village lands. However, we also recognize that we live in other rural areas, so that is inclusive of this. But approximately 71% are living in what are defined as urban areas. And we know this fluctuates. We had a whole bunch of students here who stood up and said they were going to school. Some of them came off the reservation, some of them came from village lands in Alaska. They're currently living in New York and Denver or wherever they've gone to receive those educational opportunities. We also know our people go to the cities for economic opportunity. And many people, not all, but some like myself are very privileged to be able to go back and forth. So while this number does say 71%, we recognize that that fluctuates. And our people migrate back and forth to different tribal lands for ceremony, for family, for education, and for economic reasons. But I don't care where we are living. We are always tribal people. So our urban identity is just as important as our identity when we are on our reservation lands. And for many of our people who were relocated to the cities, they don't always have the opportunity to know the songs of their people. They don't always have the opportunity to know the prayers, the very specific cultural traditions of their tribal communities. And so what has happened is that in our big urban cities, many of them have formed these intertribal communities where they hold and come together the cultural traditions of Native people as a whole. They respect their elders. They care for their youth. They ensure the next generations moving forward. So again, they are tribal people regardless of where they live. And many of them have very strong roots to their intertribal communities. And I am so thankful every single day for those Native people who were put into these cities, or sometimes the cities came to them because they were already there, who established these communities in a time when they are attempting to completely eliminate us by moving us into the cities. So I thought one of the best things to kind of tell you about how strong these intertribal communities are was to tell you a story. I'm a storyteller. Some people call us researchers. I call myself a storyteller. I'm a storyteller of health, and I do that through the ancestral practice of gathering information, analyzing that information, and using it for the health and well-being of our people. Western folks call that a researcher. I think it's a storyteller. And so I'm going to tell you a story about how strong or resilient our communities are, because we have to recognize that a lot of the movement into the urban cities was not our choice. And as a result of these colonial practices meant to eliminate us, that there is a lot of trauma in our communities, but we have the answers to overcome these. So I'm going to tell you a story, and it starts with my father. So this is a picture of my dad, Howard Echo Hawk. My dad, in the late 1960s, hitchhiked from Pawnee, Oklahoma, with some of his relatives, all the way into the state of Alaska, because at the time, many of the Echo Hawk men were trained as land surveyors, and there were job opportunities there. So they heard about the job opportunities. His uncle got him, convinced him, and they hitchhiked all the way from Pawnee to the state of Alaska. So my dad was there with his uncle for a little bit, and then his uncle left and went back to Oklahoma, and my dad hitchhiked his way from Anchorage, Alaska, all the way to Fairbanks, which is about 500 miles. And when he got to Fairbanks, he didn't know anybody, he didn't have any resources, and so when he first got there, he was homeless. And he slept under a bridge for approximately 3 to 4 weeks in Anchorage, Alaska during the summer, which it's nice and warm, but still, he was homeless. He did not have a roof over his head or a place to sleep, and so he slept under a bridge. So for my father, Native people who were moving across the state of Alaska, he would always want to take care of them when he saw them. As a result of his experiences, and also my up at Whitty Echo Hawk, his father, would always take care of Indian people wherever he saw them. And so my dad was notorious, as my mom would say, for picking up hitchhikers. So if there was somebody hitchhiking on the state of Alaska, and all we have is really long roads with no towns or lights or, it's just really long roads connecting. There's only 2 major highways in Alaska. If he saw a Native person hitchhiking, he would pick them up. And he would give them whatever money was in his wallet, and he would feed them, and he would take care of them, and if they needed a place to stay, they stayed at our house. So we had folks who stayed at our house for one night, and we had one guy who stayed for 9 years. So he wasn't so good about letting them go once. But him and my mom, when I think about it, they were the very first public health practitioners I've ever met. They took care of a community. To this day in our community, my mom feeds about 400 people on every major holiday. They took people to doctor's appointments 3 hours away. They made sure that there was food. They made sure that there was a place to live. They used to have a shed out back of our house, and they cleared all the things out of it, and what they did instead is they had 4 bunk beds and a big barrel stove, and that's where they would have people stay if they needed to. My parents took care of the community. That's what they showed us. They were the very first public health practitioners I ever knew. I just didn't know as a public health practitioner. It was just being a good person and taking care of our communities like we were meant to. So my dad, one day we're driving in the middle of nowhere, and he sees this guy walking on the side of the road. I remember it clearly. He pulls up, he asks them, "Hey, where are you going?" It was a Inupiat guy, and he said, "Oh, I don't have anywhere to go. I'm just hitchhiking up to Fairbanks and see if I can meet some relatives or, find somewhere." My dad said, "Come and stay with us." And so this man came, and he stayed with us for a year, as what happens in my family all the time. He stayed for a year, and he was an incredible guy, very musically gifted. He could play any instrument. And so my oldest sister, Colleen Echo Hawk, at the time was trying to learn how to play this crazy piano my mom bought, I think, at a yard sale. And so he taught my sister how to play the piano. She was also taking music lessons, but he really taught her how to play piano. And they used to sit there and they would play together. They had these songs that they would play together. Really nice guy. And he stayed with us for about a year, and then he began to experience some substance misuse issues. And so my parents were always careful of our safety, and so he did have to leave when these issues began to emerge. And so about 2 years later, he comes back. He shows up again, and he stays with us for 2 years this time. And him and my sister, again, I can remember sitting up in our living room and listening to the two of them laugh and talk and play the piano together. She was about 14 at the time, and they would play the piano together, and they had both gotten really good at this point in time. And so, again, his substance misuse issues and mental health problems began to arise, and one morning we woke up and he was gone. It was several years later, so I was about 11 at the time, and my sister Colleen was about 14. Several years later, his family contacted us, and they said, we had heard that he had made his way to Seattle, and they told us, they had just gotten word from some folks they knew in Seattle that he had actually passed away on the streets of Seattle, and that he was no longer with us. And I remember when my dad told us that, and I remember being really, really sad, because he was an integral part of our family and of us growing up. And so we mourned him, we cried for him, we prayed for him, and we always remembered him and the gifts that he had given to us. So fast forward many years, my sister Colleen, who's the oldest, moves to Seattle. We all really like each other. I miss my family, obviously. I keep telling you about them. We all follow her. Her 4 sisters follow her, and then her other siblings. And my sister is an incredible human being and is currently the director of an organization called the Chief Seattle Club. The Chief Seattle Club was established in 1970 when it was recognized that the urban people coming into the city of Seattle were experiencing high rates of homelessness because they were being taken off the reservations in the relocation program, placed in Seattle, given a hostel they could live in for 2 to 3 months, and then nothing. As a direct result of that, of ripping them away from their communities, we had really high rates of homelessness, substance misuse issues, behavioral health, all the things that happen when you have extreme trauma. So the Chief Seattle Club was started to create a sacred space for Native people currently experiencing homelessness to come, to have a shower, to get food, to have a place to get mail, and to be loved. So my sister is the executive director of that. She's the awesome looking one in the green coat there standing in front of her team. And my sister, incredible. When she started working at that organization, they had 11 employees. They right now have 40. When she first started, they were only open 5 days a week, and she recognized that our relatives needed a place to go 7 days a week. And so now, as of a year and a half ago, they're open 7 days a week, and they provide all of those things, including they take all of these relatives out to the local reservations where they gather things, where they You're all getting really good at this fire alarm thing. And maybe I arranged that for the world's most dramatic pause. It could be either one. So I'm excited to restart this story with you. So I'll bring us back together. I was talking about my awesome sister, Colleen Echohawk, there in the green coat, who is currently serving executive director of Chief Seattle Club in Seattle, and serving homeless Native people. And so I think we had ended with kind of talking about the services of Chief Seattle Club. They take our elders and those experiencing homelessness to gather cedar, to plant, to participate in canoe journeys. She brought on a traditional chef who prepares incredible, nutritious meals for them, and they're just an incredible organization. And she's been doing this for a really long time and is always somebody I've really looked up to because she's followed in the path of our parents. She's just caring for people in a different place. And so my sister is wandering around her organization and thought about the man that helped teach her play the piano, and she thought, you know what, if he came here, this place has been open since the 1970s, he probably came to the Chief Seattle Club. And so she went up to her front desk. This happened maybe a year ago, and she'd been the executive director for a couple of years by then, and she knew his name and asked her staff to punch in the name. And his name did pop up because he had utilized the services of the Chief Seattle Club from the moment he had come to Seattle after leaving Alaska. And not only had he been utilizing the services, he had been there 2 days before. He had not passed on. He was alive. And he had been living in the city of Seattle, homeless, and been accessing services of the Chief Seattle Club the entire time my sister was the executive director, and getting services there every couple of days. She was shocked. We were all shocked. It was the longest family text you've ever seen. We were all amazed. It was at least 100 in one day. So the next day she told her staff, you have to tell me if he comes back in. And so 2 days later he comes back in. They said he's gone upstairs and he's eating breakfast. And they serve an incredible breakfast for our relatives who have come off the streets. And she goes and she sees him. She hadn't been looking for him, but she recognized him the moment that she saw him, and she walked up and she said, hi, do you remember me? I'm Howard and Yvonne Echohawk's daughter. And she said he threw his arms back, pushed his chair halfway across the lunchroom, and he said, do you still play the piano? So not only did he remember her, he remembered the relationship that he had with her and my parents. And up at this point in time, he has been housed, been getting services. They actually played the piano together a couple times. And he continues to access services at her organization. Sometimes people think about we just serve the people we know. What I see in my sister is this incredible strength of an urban Indian, as somebody who loves her people, who's doing what her parents did, providing a space and caring for our people no matter what their circumstances. Recognizing that as a result of the colonization and the trauma that has happened, some of our relatives are currently living unhoused. That some of our relatives are experiencing mental health issues and other health issues. But we love them and we care for them regardless of their circumstances. We don't judge them. We do whatever we can to make sure that their lives are healthy and whole. That is what being a Native person is about. And we do that regardless of whether we are living in the middle of Alaska, in the middle of nowhere, or living in the city of Seattle. And so what I see in my sister is what my parents taught us, and that is we care for our community no matter what. And so I continue to see her do that and to lead in the city of Seattle because she will do anything to protect her people and to ensure that they are cared for. And so she spoke at our Women's March, and one of the things I love, that little girl sitting next to her is my niece Zoe, because my niece Zoe is learning these exact same things. So very often, again, don't believe the story that says those of us that live in urban cities are any less Native. We are Native people on Native land. It may just not be our own traditional land. And we hold the strength and the resiliencies of our people. We recognize the trauma, and we are moving into incredible, beautiful healing. And the little girls, like that little Zoe right there, who walks on every single stage that her mother goes on, and if she's around me, I bring her everywhere with me. She knows what her responsibility is, and she's 10. These same traditions exist in the rural communities, on the reservations, in the villages, in every single city in this country. So when we talk about the urban Indian community, we are strong, we are resilient, and we are fighting for our people every single day. So we can't be part of those colonization conversations that say, you're less Indian because you live in a city. Quit letting people determine for us what Indian is supposed to be. We build that ourselves, and we hold that together as a community.